Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Fixate Binge Podcast. My name is Joe. I am always here. I drop into your life if you're listening to this every single Tuesday. I have not missed a Tuesday at all this entire year. And last year, I got 50 Tuesdays out of the 52 Tuesdays for the year. So death, taxes, and this podcast are pretty dependable. So that's a kind of resilience that I'm proud of. If you're wondering if I have a life outside of this podcast, I assure you I do. I take very careful steps to ensure that I have enough time for family and work and everything else. I wish this was my main source of income. It is not, but I enjoy doing it nonetheless. I'm very passionate about this. And I hope that you enjoy stopping by every week to spend a little bit of time with me. I usually have guests. I would say 75% of the time lately. I have guests who work in the industry, who work in Hollywood, directly in Hollywood, guests from Hollywood. I have guests sometimes from London. I have guests even as far-flung as Bangkok, Thailand, or even Moscow, Russia. So I have had a gamut of guests from around the world, but most of them work within the industry here in North America, and they offer so many insights. The episode I had last week is definitely worth getting into if you haven't caught that one yet. My guest was Jethro Waters. He is an Emmy award-winning filmmaker. He is a screenwriter. He teaches screenwriting. He's so good, he can teach you how to do screenwriting if you take his class. He's based in North Carolina. He made this wonderful film called Gunfighter Paradise. It is very, very entrenched, very thick with American patriotic Christianity, Second Amendment type tropes that run throughout. And it's not a film that preaches to you. It's not trying to convert you to any one ideology over the other. But what it does do in a very poetic and satirical way in some parts, a very dark satirical way, is show you a part or a section or a portion of America that is very influential, very vocal, and I believe has taken the country into a dangerous place. So it is largely based on his lived experiences. He was a fantastic guest. Our conversation was so enjoyable. I can't wait for him to come back. I know he's working on other things, and he's keeping that under his hat. So I'm sure I'll hear from him soon. So if you enjoyed that podcast with him last week, I don't think you're going to have to wait too much longer. I think he'll be returning to the Fixate Binge Podcast, and I can't wait to have him on because he is a delight to speak to. He is such a great conversationalist, and I think that is the lifeblood of a good podcast, is to have a good colloquy, a great tete-a-tete, a wonderful back and forth between two individuals. I hope that I can facilitate those great conversations. I'm not trying to heap praise or pat myself on the back for that, but I try to be a sounding board for my guests to come on the podcast and talk about things that they're passionate about, things they're working on. So yes, if you're new to this podcast, I will have lots of creatives on here: screenwriters, producers, directors, actors slash screenwriters slash directors slash producers. So this is the place to come on it and do it. And I enjoy hosting all of you. I've had guests from Hawaii. I've had guests from, I've already bragged about where I've had guests from, but I'm very grateful to have those opportunities to speak with so many interesting people. I think my tribe, I found them, are people who are engaged in the entertainment industry, who are actively trying to create things. And I think it's such a fascinating, endlessly fascinating to talk with people that are taking big risks, who are not afraid to think outside the box and tell these wonderful, engaging, great stories. So I will stop tooting my own horn here. I want to get to a few things. I I waffle a little bit back and forth because, and what I waffle with when it comes to my raison d'etre, as it were, for this podcast is I want to give you a refuge in the storm, shelter from the storm, as Bob Dylan once sang. I want this to be that oasis in a desert. I want this to give you respite, to give you relief, to give you shade on a hot day, because the world is, in case you haven't been paying attention, is chaotic. No, it's chaotic. Now, I'm not going to be politically objective here. It's chaotic in America because we're being led by somebody whose whole life is chaos, and he is the harbinger of it. He is the orchestrator of it, because I think he thrives in chaos and confusion. So things around the world are chaotic, and I struggle back and forth. I go back and forth with this all the time because I want this podcast to be a refuge. You know, my goodness, the news cycle, the social media is always blowing up. You know, why not check in with the Fixate Binge podcast and see what's playing, what's the scuttlebutt, as it were, who's on the podcast this week. Let's take a break from the real world and let's find out something that's interesting potentially. So, having said that, I also feel some obligation. So, I mean, what I'm saying is so while I feel an obligation to provide my listeners, wherever they may be accessing this podcast from around the world, and I do have many listeners from around the world, far-flung places like Australia and beyond, and yada, 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 I do feel a responsibility to provide that continued refuge from the news cycle, from the real world, just to take you out of that headspace for a little while, right? But on the other hand, on the other side of that coin, I have a platform and I have a voice. And with that platform and with that voice, I do feel some obligation that something has to be said. You know, when I get older, I don't know if my kids will do this, but maybe my grandkids might do this one day. I don't know if they'll ever ask me this question. I imagine they might in my mind's eye, but I don't think these questions ever really actually happen. Maybe they do in the movies. But if anyone ever did ask, was Dad or Grandpa or Joe quiet while the world fell, or while the cracks in democracy and freedom were happening all around him? Did he stand on the sidelines and remain quiet? Or did he say something? Did he use his voice for something good? And so there's a part of me that feels, because of the platform, because of its reach, I do have an obligation to say something. So I go back and forth with this all the time because I don't want this to become a political hellscape where all I do is hyper-focus on politics and polemics and evil things, and the sky is falling and nothing works and everything's falling apart. The center cannot hold. You know, I don't want this podcast to be that, because I like my guests who come on, and I love just staying so positive and being such a resource of energy and celebrating their work and creativity. And I like that vibe to continue, and I want that to continue. But at the same time, I would be remiss. I really would. I would be remiss if I sat by and pretended everything was fine. It isn't fine. The United States launched missiles into Iran. Now, Iran, their Ayatollah Khomeini, he was an evil man, brutalized his people, subjugated his people through the Islamic Republican state. Very evil man. Am I sad he's off the face of the earth after, you know, Israel and U.S. bombs fell on the compound or fell on where he was? No, I'm not. I'm not. Not at all. Anytime evil is removed from the world, that's a good thing. Okay, that's a good thing. But unfortunately, one of the reasons why we don't just go targeting evil leaders around the world is because of the unintended consequences that those that like a domino effect. Except we don't know where the dominoes are going because we didn't set the dominoes up, right? So there's unintended consequences. So, for example, why don't the United States and Israel or another country go bomb the hell out of where the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is? He's evil. He's bad for the world. He doesn't belong here. He brutalizes his people. Why is he still alive and well, fat and happy? Why? Right? And we can list a couple dozen other dictators and truly evil men, despotic leaders, butchers of their people who rob them of their innocence and freedom. Why are they permitted to luxuriate in their excesses and their wickedness? Right? Well, that's a great question. I think the United States, under Donald Trump, has allowed itself to be completely manipulated by Bibi Netanyahu's Israeli government. We know that Netanyahu has long wanted to topple Iran, okay? Now let me give you a short history lesson of what happens when you topple a government in the Middle East. I mean, we have to go all the way back to the 1950s, around the time my father was born. And Churchill's UK government didn't really like the idea of President Mohammad Mossadegh nationalizing the Iranian oil industry for their interests. So much of their oil was getting picked apart and pooled into, the deep pockets of the United Kingdom. It was the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, the AIOC, that was taking the lion's share of the profits from drilling on Iranian soil. And so when they elected President Mohammad Mossadegh, and he said, I think we have enough resources to start taking more control over our destiny. Let's take control over our oil. Let's stop depending on foreign interests and foreign entities and companies that are government sponsored and government run to take most of our national resources for their benefit. It's time for us to take ownership of what belongs to us, and it truly does belong to the Iranian people. So in 1951, that's exactly what Iran did, and it was backed with so much support by the Iranian people, because here we had somebody who was leading the country and trying to lead it firmly into the 20th century, saying, we have an opportunity, we have the resources to feed the hungry, to house the homeless, to reform our educational systems, to build hospitals and schools and integrate an infrastructure. We have all the resources to do this, right? Well, Churchill didn't like that, and neither did the United States. So between 1951 and 1953, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company essentially said, you know what, go ahead and pump your own oil, but we're not going to give you the resources to sell it. So they were pumping around 240 million barrels in oil a week, and it went down to about 10 million barrels of oil because they couldn't sell it. They couldn't move it around the world because the third parties that agreed to do it were beholden to the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. And they packed up all their stuff, their engineers, their technicians, and they left Iran. And so Iran had nothing going for it. They had the resources. They didn't have a Daniel Plain view. They had oil in their land, but they didn't have Daniel Plain view. And yes, that's a reference to There Will Be Blood. That's really how Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood opens. He goes into these towns and villages, you know the scene, and he talks to them. He says, look, you've got oil, but you don't have the means of production. You don't have the resources. I have the resources. I will come in, I will pump your oil, and you can build schools and churches and things like this. You remember the scene, right? Very important scene. Well, by 1953, the CIA, working hand in hand with Churchill's MI6, staged a coup d'etat and had President Mossadegh placed under house arrest. They overthrew the Iranian government over this and installed the Shah of Iran, a dictator. They took away a democratically elected prime minister or president of Iran and installed him with a dictator, installed the country with a dictator. So for anyone out there who says the United States is all about letting freedom ring from the four corners of the earth, I want you to remind them of that example. That is not exactly true at all. If it doesn't serve U.S. interests, and we're not interested in democracy, and it didn't serve the interests of the UK and the US, who were really scared that Iran would sell the lion's share of its oil to Russia, and we were in the Cold War. So there's a wider discussion here. But the point remains. The oil, it was all about their natural resources, and it was all about taking it. So in 1953 until 1979, Iran had a dictator, and he brutalized his people, imprisoned and tortured and killed. He had death squads. He had people disappearing people off the streets at night. He really, really hammered down on any dissidents, right? And he took over the country. And it was terrible. It was terrible for its people. And because of what the United States had done, it essentially financially crippled the country as well, because the Shah of Iran lived in a luxurious palace. He was one of the wealthiest living human beings on the earth from all the oil and the deals he had made with with Britain and the United States and around the world because of the oil. And that most of that money wasn't going back to help build things that the Iranian people really truly wanted. And so in 1979, the Shah of Iran went for some medical treatments. He left the country for a little bit. And when he came back, he was ousted. He was gone. And as a result of that, when the Iranian people decided to form a new government in 1979, the Islamic state, the Iranian Islamic Republic is what they formed. It was staunchly anti-American because the Iranian people did not forget. They were robbed of their resources and they were robbed of their democracy and freedom because of foreign entities like the United States. So if you really want to know why the Iranian people, its government, has traditionally hated the United States and hated what it's trying to do around the world, you got to go all the way back to 1953, okay? I say all this not as a mini lecture in the podcast, but because there will be bombs dropping on countries, and these countries, you'll be told, they hate us, they hate our way of life, they can't stand us. And it's like, do your job and explain where those feelings of distrust, where those feelings of hate come from. Because on day one of those bombs, last weekend, they bombed a school for girls. 150 plus girls, children were killed. And now, as a result of this, war has broken out all over the Middle East. Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. I mean, Iran launched bombs at Cyprus, and Cyprus is a member of the EU and NATO, a member of NATO, and NATO had to shoot down a bomb to knock it down. Some of the bombs are not being stopped from landing on Tel Aviv in Israel. And so some of Iranian bombs are getting through. People are being killed. I don't think it's a good thing at all. This is why we don't launch bombs on people we don't like or use that as a pretext to do it. And it is a war. And if you live in America and you know anything about American laws, you know that no sitting president can declare war without approval from Congress. There was no approval. They just launched bombs. And now we have erupted. We've turned the global markets upside down. Oil, 20% of the world's oil resources travel through a 21-mile stretch, which is very narrow in global terms, a 21-mile stretch called the Strait of Hormuz off the coast of Iran, and that's been closed. So now 20% of the world's oil is bottlenecked. They can't get through. So now, naturally, the cost of oil went from, $60. Now it's over $100. And they're thinking it could go as high as $150 a barrel. That's crazy. That's raising the price of everything. Goods, everything that needs gasoline, which is an oil byproduct, to be delivered to your grocery store. Everything that requires that, which is everything. Jet fuel, gasoline, all of it. It's all going to go up. And if you are a Republican and you're still listening to this, you haven't turned it off, you were promised You were promised low prices on everything, that prices would fall. You were promised no new wars. You were promised affordability. You were promised that things would be cheaper. You were promised so many things. And this breaks so many promises, of course. And now we have chaos. And there doesn't seem to be an end in sight, and nor does there seem to be an end objective. What are we trying to get out of this? Because yes, we killed the Ayatollah, which is the religious clerical leader of Iran. But it's like, okay, now what? The Iranian people have not risen up to overthrow their government. What are you trying to do? So, I've turned this into a segment on CNN, and I didn't want to do that because we're supposed to be talking about movies. But in this environment of despair, and in this moment of what's going to happen now, is the world ending? There were a few things that came to mind, and I wanted to talk to you about a couple of them because I think they bear repeating. First of all, I saw a lovely little quote. Sometimes I'm doom scrolling on TikTok and I'll come across something and it will make me pause for just a moment and absorb its meaning. It was a quote from an author named Ingrid Goff Madoff. I hope that's no relation to Bernie Madoff, who wrote in her work, who's a poet, and the work was called The Honey Box. She wrote, "God spoke today in flowers, and I, who was waiting on words, almost missed the conversation." I thought that was really pretty, really nice, comforting. The other thing I thought that was really interesting is we lost a very well-known, globally well-known religious leader. Not without some controversy. He had his ups and downs. None of us are perfect. But the Reverend Jesse Jackson has departed the earth and has shuffled off his mortal coil. And that funeral for Reverend Jesse Jackson brought together a lot of interesting and beloved people. And when former President Barack Obama took the pulpit, and by the way, full disclosure, I was not a Barack Obama supporter when he was president. I didn't vote for him. I wish I could say I had, but I didn't. I didn't vote for him. But I remember also being very critical growing up during the Reagan years of Jimmy Carter. And I look back on it now and I go, you know what? I wish I had a better perspective on things. I wish I had lived my life a little more fully, or I had a little bit more experience on the earth living to be able to really see. But nonetheless, it's never too late. But I digress a bit. Barack Obama had a wonderful eulogy for the Reverend Jesse Jackson. But I want to play his most memorable words. And they're tinged with current events. They're tinged with what it's like living in America under the current administration, which is beginning more and more every day to feel like a regime. So I don't know if I'm going to get in any copyright trouble. I can't imagine that Barack Obama's speech, which was, it's in the public domain, I can't imagine this is copyrighted. It was a eulogy. It's not a piece of art or a work that will be published. This is in the public domain. These are his words, and I want to take a moment with you. Let's listen together and listen to what he had to say at Jesse Jackson's funeral.
We are living in a time when it can be hard to hope. Each day we wake up to some new assault on our democratic institutions. Another setback to the idea of the rule of law. An offense to common decency. Every day you wake up to things you just didn't think were possible. Each day we're told by those in high office to fear each other and to turn on each other, and that some Americans count more than others, and that some don't even count at all. Everywhere we see greed and bigotry being celebrated, and bullying and mockery masquerading as strength. We see science and expertise denigrated, while ignorance and dishonesty and cruelty and corruption are reaping untold rewards. Every single day we see that, and it's hard to hope. It may be tempting for some to compromise with power and grab what you can, or even for good people to maybe just put your head down and wait for the storm to pass. But this man, Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson, inspires us to take a harder path. And because if we don't step up, no one else will. How fortunate we were that Jesse Jackson answered that call.
Amen. Amen. It is tempting to put our head down until the storm passes. And that kind of dovetails into what I was saying at the beginning of this podcast. You know, I still feel I have an obligation to say something and not remain silent. So I wanted to share that with you. Do not lose hope. Do not lose despair. There are wonderful things out there. There are wonderful influences around you. This is a time for family. It's a time for friends. It's a time for putting positive influences in your life. As many of you know, I talk openly, not a lot about it, but I talk openly about the importance of your mental health and mental well-being. And it is so easy to look out into the world we live in and to be despairing and to lose hope. And I think it's so inspiring for somebody whose message here is really about never losing hope, because the world needs us. It needs you. It needs you to be hopeful, less hateful, less judgmental, and a lot more loving. So with that in mind, with everything going on, with the Iranian war raging out of control, right? And all the bad things in the world, and the price of everything going up, you might actually like this episode from this point on, because let's talk a little bit about what might happen to your pocketbook. Going out is going to become more expensive. Going out to eat, going out to catch a movie, going out to watch some of your favorite upcoming movies on the big screen, it might not be in your budget. Or if it is in your budget, you won't be able to go, or not find it financially feasible to go as often as you would like. And that's going to affect me too. So this episode, I want to talk to you very briefly about a few things that you can stream right now, because just in the last few days, I've watched several things from the comfort of my own home. And other than the monthly subscription prices I'm already paying, it didn't cost me a thing. And this is worth your time, very much worth your time. No order of importance here or anything. There's no list of the top things here, but I will tell you that I watched a film. It's called War Machine, and it stars Alan Richardson, and it just debuted this weekend on Netflix. And I'm going to briefly read to you my response for that film. I think it was really an impressive vehicle for Alan Richardson. And this is my review, so just hang in there. I try not to use any spoilers. So Netflix's latest direct-to-streaming film, War Machine, no, not the other Netflix direct-to-streaming War Machine from 2017, also starring Brad Pitt, is a solid actioner starring Brick Shithouse, Alan Richardson, that fans of the first Predator film will enjoy. Richardson's screen presence is as enjoyable as any Schwarzenegger film he's ever done. And for anyone waiting to catch the latest season of Amazon's Reacher, which I'm a big fan of, this will surely slake your thirsts until it drops later this year. The plot is fairly straightforward, with Richardson, an active Special Forces Army soldier, determined to fulfill a brotherly promise to enter and complete Ranger Assessment Selection Program, or RASP, to become an elite Army Ranger. The setup is good here. The training scenes look believably grueling as the special ops training nears its final hell week before selection is over for the coveted placement. And that's where all hell breaks loose in one of the best sci-fi action films in recent memory that literally pits man versus machine. It isn't Isaac Asimov or Arthur C. Clarke, nor does it want to be. This is just a straightforward military sci-fi action film that unabashedly tips its hat to its predecessors with a very game Richardson, I say Richardson, but it might be Richson, who lights up the screen, cementing his place as an action film star who deserves more attention. Co-written and directed by Patrick Hughes, co-starring Dennis Quaid, Esai Morales, and Jai Courtney, the film is streaming now on Netflix. I gave it 3.5 stars. I wasn't too hyped on the very ending, but I gave it 3.5 stars. It exceeded my expectations, and I'm a pretty big Alan Ritchson fan, so big enough to mispronounce his name probably a few times there. But nonetheless, that is on Netflix right now. I think it's the top film right now on Netflix, and it's top 10 globally, so it's worth watching. The special effects are really good, so it's not like some piece of crap film. Now, the next thing that I watched was earlier today. I watched that with my daughter, and it just dropped on HBO. It's a comedy called Fackham Hall, and you have to be very careful how you say that. If you say that 10 times real fast, you might get your mouth washed out with soap if you're a kid and your parents don't let you use that type of language. Fackham Hall, which is very much in the vein of the Zucker Brothers, Naked Gun type slapstick farce humor, is clearly a send-up of the Downton Abbey craze. The writing is so funny. The sight gags are nonstop. You can't even blink more than 5 seconds in this film, and you will miss an inside joke or a sight gag. Even the joke, which is a very esoteric joke about the Begdal sisters, and by the way, you should look that up, the Begdal test, is hilarious. Jimmy Carr plays the vicar in the church, and all of his dialogue is absolutely phenomenally brilliant, so funny, couldn't stop laughing. It's the punctuation and the language and Jimmy Carr's delivery nearly stole the whole film for me. So funny. Damian Lewis, who isn't known for playing comedy roles. I mean, he was in Homeland. He's done a lot of serious work. He's hilarious throughout this. Catherine Waterston is in this. She's hilarious. If you've watched Downton Abbey, I haven't, but I'm not also ignorant of what Downton Abbey is and the phenomena. I think this film is going to be 10 times funnier and more enjoyable for you. Fackham Hall was hilarious from beginning to end. The gags were hilarious. If you're in the mood for just something that doesn't take 1 minute seriously, I think Fackham Hall is brilliant. Absolutely hilarious. Clearly the comedy of the year for me. And the year's not out yet. We still get another scary movie back after all these years. So we'll see where that takes us. But I loved it. It was funny. My daughter and I laughed our heads off at it. So it's out. It's on HBO. Don't miss it. It just dropped. The last thing I want to talk to you about before I let you go, because I know I've been nattering on, I've been talking and jawing a little too much here, is I finally got to see The Secret Agent, okay? And that is directed by Kleber Mendonca Filho. I don't know if I'm saying that name correctly, but I'm just gonna go with the pronunciation because Hooked on Phonics worked for me, and that's the way it's spelled. That's the way I'm gonna guess it's pronounced. So I got a chance to finally see that, and you can see it. It is on Peacock Plus. I believe it's on Peacock Plus. Let me double check that. No, excuse me, I was wrong. It's on Hulu, which is great because I had been wanting to watch this mainly because Wagner Moura is nominated for Best Actor, which is, I think, the first time a Brazilian actor in history has ever been nominated for an Academy Award for acting. But Wagner Moura is nominated for the Best Actor in this, and the film, The Secret Agent, is nominated in multiple categories. It's nominated as the best international film, but also the best picture film. So it's up there with all these great, like Sinners and One Battle After Another and all these things, and F1 and all that, right? So it's up there. So I finally got a chance to watch it. I'm going to read to you my review and, take from it what you will, but this is my review. So settle in. It's a bit of a long one, but the film was really, dense with a lot of things going on in it. This is my review of Mendonca, excuse me, I'll get this right eventually, Mendonca Filho's The Secret Agent. It helps to have at least a passing understanding of Brazil's political landscape in the 1970s when approaching Kleber Mendonca Filho's The Secret Agent. Ruled by a military dictatorship until the mid-1980s, the country still carries the traumatic residue of injustice and repression. Once regarded as a relative moderate who would guide Brazil back toward democracy, General Ernesto Geisel has since been reassessed in light of declassified government files. Those records confirmed what many long suspected. Geisel presided over a police state that targeted and executed perceived political enemies, not unlike the Stasi in East Germany. It is against this tense and corrupt backdrop that Mendonca Filho sets The Secret Agent. The opening scene makes that corruption explicit. A police search of our protagonist devolves into an attempted bribe, while a deceased criminal lies ignored on the ground just feet away. As the film unfolds, we learn that widowed technology researcher Marcelo Alves, played by Wagner Moura, has returned to Recife under assumed names Armando Solomos and Fernando Solomos to reunite with a son being raised by his in-laws. There, he takes refuge among fellow dissidents in an apartment compound run by the elderly Dona Sebastiana, played endearingly by the feisty Tania Maria. One of Mendonca Filho's tremendous strengths as a writer and director is his ability to assemble characters from the margins of society and observe what forms when they are forced into community, a dynamic he explored to striking effect in his 2019 film, Bacurau, which I watched and reviewed, a great film. Mendonca Filho's background as both a cinephile and journalist is put to strong use in The Secret Agent, as Moura's Alves attempts to reconstruct his past. He takes a job as a records clerk, a position that allows him to search for his mother's death certificate while quietly reconnecting with his young son, Fernando. Alves's clandestine meetings with two investigative journalists reveals the depths of his plight and why he fled to Recife after crossing a corrupt government official who hires two contract killers to track him down and murder him for his dissidence. The marketing suggests something closer to the nerve-shredding paranoia of Marathon Man, a cat and mouse thriller built on pursuit, conspiracy, and tightening dread. But where Marathon Man weaponizes paranoia into kinetic suspense, The Secret Agent diffuses it into atmosphere, prioritizing lived-in detail over narrative propulsion. That decision certainly dilutes the film from being a suspense thriller and turns it into a more thoroughly fleshed out, fully realized examination on systemic corruption in Brazilian life. Echoes of government corruption are still, to this day, with the Brazilian people, and Mendonca Filho's film connects the events of the past with the present as a reminder to never forget. Many have praised Moura's vulnerable and tortured performance here, and it is certainly praiseworthy. But if I'm being honest, The Secret Agent subverts a lot of expectations, drags in certain places, and shifts its narrative perspectives with the past and present in ways that seem disruptive to the film's pacing. With a runtime of 2 hours and 40 minutes, The Secret Agent feels a lot like two films sewn together that takes its foot off the gas just when we might have appreciated the film to keep pace. Like the discarded dead body at the film's beginning, the film starts to feel a little bloated. But thankfully, Mendonca Filho's sticks the landing, and Moura's performance alone is enough to overlook the other deficiencies. The film co-stars Udo Kier in his final film role, Hermila Guedes, Maria Fernando Candido, and Roberto Diogenes, and is streaming now on Hulu. And that's my review. So I urge you to see it. If you ask me who I think is going to win Best Actor, I don't think it's Wagner. I think that would be an upset. He was great. He was great, but I don't, for my view, I think the Best Actor Academy Award is either DiCaprio, who's already won one, or it's going to be Michael B. Jordan for Sinners. I just think it's not going to go towards Timothée Chalamet. And I think Chalamet's comments this weekend about opera and ballet are not going to help him. Anyway, I'm going to leave you here. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy these wonderful films. You can stream them now from the comfort of your home if you already have these streaming services. They're great movies, each of them, and so distinct and so different from each other. I also got a chance to see Nuremberg with Russell Crowe and Rami Malek, and that is also a great film to check out. It's a very sad film. There's some disturbing scenes, but they're stock footage. Of course, the Nuremberg trials are about how the Allied forces dealt with Nazi war criminals. So Russell Crowe plays a very, very chilling Hermann Göring. So that alone is well worth it, and that is streaming on Netflix now. I mean, I don't think you'll be disappointed watching that. I really don't. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. I promise this podcast will be back next week. I swear it. It'll be back next week. I've got some interesting, fascinating guests coming up. I'm chasing down a few other leads to get some confirmations. But we're going to have ourselves a great spring. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're looking after yourself. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.